all YouTubers. Just a quick one. Just a quick message. I'm about to assemble a little video together with, as I've mentioned, I've been going on about me going through me VHS tapes from television, and I've been sifting through all kinds of adverts. Man, it took me hours and hours. I still haven't finished yet, but once I've got all the stuff put onto hard drives, converted from VHS to hard drives, I'll be able to share it with you, you know, because some of the adverts are really strange and creepy, and I've always had my firm belief that the Freemasons communicate to each other through adverts. Basically, that's their medium, you know. But that's another point altogether, right? So anyway, I've been sifting through all the videos, and I managed to find some of my footage of 9/11, right, folks? Which is, you've got to bear in mind that most of the footage on YouTube about 9/11 is most likely from people who were watching it on American TV, because it was a bit more concise, or cable TV, or Sky and things like that, right? Whereas all I had was, I got out of bed just after the planes, you know, the so-called planes had struck the second tower, right? I got out of bed, I had a late night that night, so I got out of bed quite late. And I immediately started recording the television, right? On video, on a VHS tape, via BBC TV News, right? And I was flicking, and then on the actual recordings, I'll get it all together once I haven't found all the footage that I recorded, you see. But you've got to think of it from a British living room in England. I'm in England watching television, filming the news from a British perspective, and certain things popping up, you know, because it was live, and a lot of the footage was coming from America, from news channels in America, and they were making sure that certain things weren't seen in England, obviously, while it was all going on, right, folks? So this is the crucial thing, is you've got to bear in mind that I was recording it from my living room while it was all going on. The planes had already struck the towers, right? And while I was watching, the towers fell down, right? And on British television, I'll put the entire tapes up eventually, what I recorded. It's just a matter of interest that people are interested in the perspective or my point of view, right? And what was weird is, in my video, I don't know if I've seen it in anyone else's recording on YouTube or via the internet or whatever, but I'm going to put a clip in. This is, I'm doing a speech, and I'll sort of mix it on my video, you know, me Sony Vegas or whatever, with the clip in question. I'm not intending to show you all the, you know, the footage that I recorded of 9/11. I just want you to see one little thing that I think is quite strange, right? Where something comes up, just a frame comes up, and then it goes off really quick. Now, I'm going to put it up, and I'll pause it and everything, or put it in slow motion or whatever, so that it stays on the screen for a long time, so you can work it out for yourselves, or I just like your opinions, basically, on what you think it could be, what it's talking about, what it's about. And what I'll do is I'll put this vid up, and then let you see for yourselves, because I know that lately on YouTube, if anyone puts anything up about 9/11 or anything like that, they're blocking things and that, but that's only assuming you're monetized, right, folks? You know, if your channel's monetized, if you've monetized your channel and you're trying to make money on YouTube, you better forget trying to tell the truth about stuff, because it's not necessarily that they're trying to stop the truth getting out. It's not savoury for advertisers, you see. You know, if you're monetized, you're in partnership with YouTube, and you're supposedly advertising things. You know, if you go on YouTube to make money, and that's all you want to do, then gear your videos so that, like, advertisers can advertise in between your videos. And because it wouldn't seem right, would it? Adverts like entertainment or whatever, advertising stuff, and you're putting a video up about, like, you know, vampires all over the world, or, you know, gang stalkers or whatever. No advertisers are going to be in the middle of that, are they? They don't want to be seen to be associating themselves with stuff like that. So that's why a lot of the stuff's happening on YouTube, why things are being taken down, or they're not, you know, the demonetizing videos and things like that, because you've got to do a deal with them. You're in partnership with them for adverts. So you've got to bear in mind, my channel is not advertised. I've got no monetization on any of my videos except the ones I've got no choice, right, folks? And I'll give you an example. The videos where I've done a Pink Floyd song is monetized by Pink Floyd. The ZZ Top song is monetized by ZZ Top. A couple of the songs I did covers of, they haven't actually monetized them. You know, there's a few out there that don't monetize you, like they don't block you or monetize you. But recently I put a video up about adverts. It's called Creepy Adverts. I say creepy because I mean the way the Freemasons communicate to one another via the adverts, with car adverts and stuff like that, yeah. And in one of them adverts, it actually got monetized. I was hoping it wouldn't get blocked. Obviously, as long as they don't get blocked, I don't care. And I'm not making any money off them anyway. So if they monetize my videos or demonetize them, and I'm nothing to do with that, it's not me doing it, folks. You get me right? So if any adverts pop up in any of my videos, I don't mean my adverts, what I've put up. I mean the adverts that they put up in the middle of things. It's nothing to do with me, because that's why I don't monetize in the first place. Because I get my money off Social Security and I get enough to live on, basically, right? So I don't want my viewers having to put up with adverts in the middle of the videos, because there's nothing worse than watching a YouTube video and something comes up in the middle of it just all of a sudden. So if any of that happens in any of my videos, folks, that you're watching, it's nothing to do with me. But as long as they're not blocked, that's all that matters to me, right? So anyway, I put a video up recently of a load of creepy adverts. And the one that was monetized, it come up like, this video's been monetized, blah, and you know where you can check out what the piece of music is or what it is that's actually been monetized. And it was the one with the advert, with the, it was a piece of music called Montserrat something, or, you know, like a piece of supposedly like modern classical music. And it was the one with the advert with the car. It's a car advert, for crying out loud. And you see like people playing table tennis and football in it. In case you want to go back and check which one it is. And this man's voice says, only when you understand movement can you really, you know, blah, blah, blah. He's talking about a car and classical music at the same time, you know what I mean? The way they've got their heads up their asses, basically, like all them people out there, like. So that's why that one was monetized. Anyway, all the other clips didn't seem to be spotted or whatever, because there's bits of music in them, isn't there, and things. So anyway, I'm going to put this clip up. I'm going to assemble this little video. And it's a clip from 9/11, right? From my own clips of 9/11. I'll put the entire clip in, and then I'll pause it or whatever, and do a slow, you know, so you can see the clip in question that I'm trying to point out. I'll repeat the frame so that you know what I'm pointing out. But I don't think anyone else caught it or recorded it. Maybe other people in Britain, but you've got to think about, like, we've all got our own living rooms and we're all sitting watching TV in our own little comfort zones, yeah. And, you know, I think we see things differently. Everyone sees things slightly differently depending on where we live and what we, you know, if we're in with the in crowd or not or whatever, like. But at the time, I was still mad. I was still, during, when 9/11 was happening, I was off my head, mentally ill, basically. I wasn't on YouTube. It was well before I ever went on YouTube. Let's put it that way. Like, I didn't start going on YouTube until about 2006, 2007, maybe. I'm not sure. So anyway, I'll finish with this speech. And basically, what I want you to do in the comments or whatever, just tell me what you think. Just tell me what you think this clip or this little piece, this little frame, is referring to and what it's all about, because it pops up unexpectedly. Like they've got no control, if you know what I mean. Like there's no control. Remember, the World Trade Center has just been hit by a couple of planes. They've already been hit by the time I start recording. And I'll just be interested to see what you think out there, and then I'll see what yous have got to say. And then later on, after assessing if it's worth talking about it, because people block me videos and stuff in a kind of, you know, the psyops and the cyber warriors or whatever, they're all onto me. Like, someone's onto me, I know that for sure. Like, but anyway, I'll post a speech up later on after a couple of weeks or something, telling you what I think the clip is like, because it's a bit controversial, like, folks, and it might get me into trouble. Do you understand? So, and you know me, I can't keep my mouth shut. What God whispers to you privately, you must shout from the rooftops. That's the way I see it, like. So anyway, without any further ado, I'm going to stop this speech and start assembling the actual video itself so that it's watchable. And the clip that I'll put the original clip up as it was, so you see how long it's on the screen for, right? And then I'll start like editing it so it repeats and repeats and repeats, and you get a good, you know, bit of time to read the dummy card, whatever it is that appears on the screen. It's basically a dummy card, you know, just like a frame. So, and it's in the middle of a live broadcast on the news. So anyway, I'll put it up anyway. But I found it the other night. I only found it the other night, folks. The reason I haven't put it up earlier is because I've just had to sift through like 100 VHS tapes to find this clip, you know what I mean? I didn't have it labelled, it wasn't labelled, so it's took me ages to find it right. So anyway, without any further ado, I'll pause this and start assembling the thing for you. And comments, please, and please tell me what you think and whatever. And if any secret agents poison me or whatever afterwards, if I die after I put this video up, perish the thought. Alright, see you later.
Groups with an Islamic connection who have for various reasons set up in opposition to the United States over the last 10 years or so, and have made the United States their principal targets in a series of attacks really going back to the end of the 80s. If you think about the explosions in discotheques in Europe and the Lockerbie bomb explosion, all of those were kind of a pattern of attacks against American citizens, which have been stepped down a bit in the last few years, but nonetheless there's been repeated warnings they might come, and if you remember, there have been repeated American attacks on people they thought were responsible for the explosion at the Nairobi embassy bombing. When that was blown up there, they attacked the people they believe were responsible with the attacks in Sudan and elsewhere. So it's at that stage there's still a great deal of argument of whether they were correct in who they targeted. And at moments like this, it's very difficult to know who they will, but it's very much in the psyche, if you like, of President Bush to be seen as fairly determined on this occasion. As you notice that he said there, we're going to hunt down and find those people. Terrorism will not succeed against the United States. You
can't rule anything out, though. I'm thinking back to the Oklahoma bombing, when actually it was, to use a phrase, the enemy within. It wasn't from outside.
I mean, that is obviously the caution one has to put into this, that on that occasion, quite senior people were going around talking immediately about this was an extremist Islamic attack against the United States, and the word Arab terrorism was used a lot. Of course, it turned out to be extremists inside the United States, people who were on the far right, who believed that the government itself needed to be attacked, and had done so, and part of the extreme far right in the United States. So that is an option, and at this stage it would be foolish to say exactly who it was that was responsible.
For the moment, Brian Hanrahan, thank you.
Well, just to update you, for those of you who are joining us on BBC One and News 24, you're watching live pictures of the World Trade Center in Manhattan on fire. Both towers of the World Trade Center on fire. The North Tower was hit by a passenger plane, a twin-engine passenger plane, shortly before 9 a.m. United States East Coast time. That's 2 p.m. in the United Kingdom. A few minutes later, the South Tower, also 110 stories, was hit by a small passenger plane. President Bush, speaking a few moments ago, has said that he believes it may be the result of a terrorist attack. We're getting police reports from New York which suggests that both these planes, passenger planes, were hijacked in Boston and were flown from Massachusetts down the eastern seaboard to New York before being flown into the Twin Towers. I'm joined now by Tom Simons, who's our transport correspondent. It is quite extraordinary, Tom, is it not, that if these were terrorist attacks, that people could have flown planes over Manhattan directly into the World Trade Center. How easy is it to fly over Manhattan?
Well, surprisingly easy. There are, just to give you some idea of the aviation landscape around there, there are four airports in fact. Islip is an airport actually on Manhattan itself, very small airport. There is of course Newark, John F. Kennedy's airport, and LaGuardia. And many people who've been to Manhattan will of course know that pleasure flights are extremely common. The airspace is not actually that heavily regulated.
What we're watching there is a replay of one of the two explosions that occurred approximately 13 minutes ago in Manhattan, colliding into the two towers of the World Trade Center, two separate planes. We know that, of course, that all the airports in the Manhattan area, in the New York area, in fact, have been closed down now. If these were small twin-engine passenger planes, how easy would it be for a terrorist to hire one of these and to fly it across New York airspace?
Well, if they did try and hire a plane, it is possible. But of course, to make any flight in any controlled airspace anywhere in the world, you have to actually file a flight plan. So any plane of that size taking off from a large airport without a flight plan will be pretty quickly spotted and hunted down by the FAA and indeed the military, because of course if a plane was being flown from Boston with no permission, potentially hijacked straight towards Manhattan, then the military will be called in very quickly.
Well, you're saying that, but we're now getting reports that a third passenger plane has been hijacked. There's no immediate news of its whereabouts. The first two planes, according to FBI sources, were hijacked in Boston, but we're getting reports that a third plane was hijacked. How is it possible, if this is true, that two planes were hijacked in Boston and managed to travel that distance? It's not a very short distance between Boston and Manhattan without being intercepted.
It may be, of course, that route, Boston to Manhattan, has been carefully chosen, because you say the flying time is very short, but perhaps long enough to give a slight leeway for anybody trying to fly straight towards Manhattan. I imagine that the hour or so it would take to fly that distance would make it very difficult for the American Air Force to mount any form of operation to try and take these planes away from the danger zone. If they have passengers on board, that would be even more difficult, if not impossible. So clearly, we're talking about a carefully planned operation, and it's very difficult to know how it could have been stopped.
And of course, it's a built-up area for much of the eastern seaboard, so even if they knew that the planes were hijacked and wanted to try and get them down, it would be very difficult to get them down without forcing them to crash land on populated areas.
Of course, and we're talking about an area, again, with 4 airports. So if we're suspecting this may be an operation where the authorities thought these planes were heading towards one of 4 airports, then it's very difficult to tell which way they were going to go. They had, if you like, somewhere to be headed for if it wasn't Manhattan.
Okay, Tom, stay with us for an update on that third plane that may have been hijacked as well.
We're getting
handing
more.
over to Valerie.
Thank you. We're getting more news just in, John, that from the Reuters news agency, that a Palestinian group has claimed responsibility for the New York World Trade Center plane attacks. Apparently, Abu Dhabi Television reported it had received a call from the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine Abroad, claiming responsibility for crashing 2 planes into the World Trade Center buildings. Qatar-based Al Jazeera Television said FBI sources said one of the 2 aircraft had been hijacked. Of course, we're getting different details about that. But let me bring in our diplomatic editor, Brian Hanrahan. What do you make of this, Brian?
I'd be cautious. I think we're going to see a lot of claims of responsibility almost immediately after this. Remember, the big suicide bombing in Israel was immediately claimed by 2 different groups. So clearly one of them wasn't telling the truth. So there is a tendency on these occasions for people to leap into the frame very swiftly and say that they're responsible, whereas those who are responsible are often much quieter about it, because to admit responsibility, or at least to be believed, is to bring down retaliation on your head very quickly from the United States, and an angry United States is not something that most groups would want to face up to if they can be reached. So it is possible that these are it, but it seems an unlikely place for a call to come in and a slightly unusual position. So I think we should treat these with some caution initially.
What will be happening now as far as the diplomatic routes around the world go? Because obviously the American administration have to act fast.
Yes, I mean they will now be talking to everybody they can find to see if there's any clue whatsoever as to where this is coming from. The obvious. I'm hesitating because I see another building on fire, and we're not quite sure what it is at the moment, coming from Washington. Apparently.
It's very like Washington, doesn't it?
And in fact, it looks almost as though it's the area around the White House, but I'm not sure that at this stage, just glancing at it.
This apparently is the Pentagon we're seeing.
it doesn't look like the normal shot of the Pentagon. It looks more like some of the executive buildings in downtown Washington, not very far away from the White House itself.
It looks much more like the area around about the Vice President's residence, doesn't it? From those sort of pictures that we're
at the moment we really don't know what this is about, but these are the pictures which are emerging from Washington on a day when we've already had this startling news from New York about the planes crashing. There was a warning, I think, John, you were reporting a moment ago, about a third plane possibly hijacked and disappearing. And now we are seeing this building aflame in Washington, so one assumes that there is possibly some connection there. They're both, it seems too much of a coincidence.
Brian, we're getting definite reports that this is the area behind the Pentagon, that we may not be looking at it from the conventional angle, but we are being told that this is an explosion that we're witnessing in the area around about the Pentagon in Washington, D.C.
Another very symbolic target, if that is the case, if it has been made the choice of an attack, because it obviously represents American power.
We're being told, in fact, that the White House itself has been evacuated.
That would be an obvious precaution at a moment like this. In fact, most of the major buildings in Washington, I suspect, will now find themselves being evacuated. It is quite startling day, almost like something out of a thriller, isn't it? Rather than reality. I mean, whoever decided to go down this route was aiming for maximum publicity on the world stage, and has certainly succeeded in drawing major attention to what they're doing.
Well, the latest we have is both the White House and the Pentagon have been evacuated after an apparent terrorist attack there. We're looking at pictures there of the area behind the Pentagon. Apparently Pentagon officials have ordered employees out of the building, which of course is just outside Washington. This follows two planes which were apparently hijacked, crashing into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York. And first reports, certainly President George W. Bush is saying that the attack on the World Trade Center is an apparent terrorist attack. John.
Well, we're going to cross to our correspondent now in Washington, D.C., Stephen Sveach. Stephen, as you know, two planes have crashed into the World Trade Center. We're getting pictures now, which I don't believe you can see, but we're showing them, of smoke billowing in the area of the Pentagon. What more can you tell us about the scene in Washington, D.C.? We know, do we not, that the White House has been evacuated?
Yes, I have seen some of those pictures. It's a pretty dramatic day here in Washington. I think people in government buildings all around the city are going to be pretty nervous if indeed they haven't already been evacuated. Clearly this is a very, very coordinated operation. We've had the attack on the World Trade Center's symbols of American capitalism, if you like, and now it would seem something going on, some fire going on, we don't know quite how that started, around the area of the Pentagon. Symbols of U.S. power, the U.S. government.
Stephen, Stephen, can I interrupt you, because we've just had it confirmed that the pictures that we are now seeing are of smoke billowing out of the Pentagon. The Pentagon has now, of course, been evacuated. We had reports through the FBI that a third plane had been hijacked, so we know that two crashed into the towers of the World Trade Center in New York. A third plane had been hijacked. We don't yet know for certain where that plane went, but the pictures that we are now showing are of the Pentagon with smoke billowing out of it. The Pentagon has been evacuated, of course the symbol of American military power, and the White House, the symbol of American political power, has also been evacuated.
Well, these are absolutely extraordinary moments here in Washington, here in really the whole of the United States. The idea that the Pentagon, this is the headquarters of the Defense Department, all of the US military power, which of course has been projected so much around the world, for that to come under attack in this way, if indeed this is an attack on the Pentagon, not some sort of extraordinary coincidence.
Yes, we can interrupt you again. An aircraft has crashed near the United States Defense Department, so we can confirm now that a third plane has crashed, this one near the United States Defense Department. The west wing of the White House has been evacuated, and of course the Pentagon itself has been evacuated. We don't as yet know that this aircraft which crashed near the Defense Department was the one that was hijacked in Boston, but it seems more than coincidence.
Well, I think this really is the most extraordinary day for people here and for really the whole of the United States. I think never before, I think I'm right in saying, has something on this scale and with this symbolic potency happened here. For the Pentagon to come under attack.
The U.S. Treasury, according to at least one eyewitness, is being evacuated.
Well, we're just being told, of course, that the United States Treasury has also been evacuated. It's not that extraordinary, is it, Stephen Speech, that major buildings of power in Washington would now be evacuated. If there's been an explosion in the Pentagon, it would be only sensible to evacuate buildings that represent American power, and that's, of course, now what's happening.
Yes, exactly. I mean, if I was sitting in one of those buildings just down the road from here, in the Treasury or in the White House or in the State Department, I think I'd be pretty nervous, and I'd be wanting to be evacuated too. This seems to be a very, very coordinated operation, and one does wonder, you know, is there anything more coming? You know, this is absolutely quite remarkable, and I think it's going to give Americans a sense of being under threat, if not in physical terms for the whole population. The symbolic power is remarkable and quite chilling, I think, for people here.
Well, of course, there's going to be claim and counterclaim of responsibility. A few moments ago, somebody purporting to represent the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine phoned Abu Dhabi Television and claimed responsibility for that. We were cautioned about taking that seriously at the time, and it seems that we were right to exercise some caution, because the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine has denied all responsibility for the World Trade Center crash, the crash in which we already know that 6 people have been killed, over 1,000 injured, with the sad expectation that there could be many, many more people killed. Stephen, what is the atmosphere like in Washington at the moment? Obviously, there could easily be an atmosphere of near panic in the streets, in particular around about the Capitol buildings.
I think a sense of great vulnerability, and I think a sense that for the United States, a real feeling that there are people out there who do not, well, it may not be that they don't like this country, but they certainly don't like the people who run this country, and I think one has to say it's almost certainly connected with the United States and its foreign policy.
It could be, you know, behind these attacks. And we know that Osama bin Laden groups attack American destroyer Cole in Aden, attacked American military personnel in Saudi Arabia. 19 of them were killed. Also in Khobar and Riyadh. So also Osama bin Laden issued a fatwa to attack American wherever they are, and he considered them occupying power in his country, Saudi Arabia. So maybe it is the work of radical Islamic group. But
it ever could have been for terrorist attacks.
Well, the World Trade Center has been a very secure building since the last incidents in the 90s, and in order to get to any of the offices there, you have to go through security on the ground floor, you have to be badged, you have to be announced before you can get into the elevators to visit any building. But the thought of a commercial airliner being hijacked and flown deliberately into a building is almost possible to safeguard against. I actually saw the first plane crash into the first building. It came over my apartment building in Greenwich Village, which is not so far from the World Financial Center, and it sounded as if it was a military jet because it was so low, but it did have a whining sound as if it was losing height, and it was then followed by this very, very loud explosion. And then from the roof of my building, I could see the unbelievable, which was this huge pall of smoke coming from about 20 stories below the summit of the building. And then, incredibly, as if this were not enough, when the television networks began to run the story, we could see live a second incident where the second plane crashed into the second building. That was seen live here on television. So the city is in crisis. The subways are shut. All public buildings will be shut. I imagine that all high-rise buildings here will be evacuated. We know that 3 planes have been hijacked. They appear to be commercial airliners. I've heard some of your other commentators saying this itself is incredible in the United States, where security is at its maximum at commercial airfields. This is an unfolding story. We don't know what is going to happen, but I think that the whole of New York is on full emergency alert.
Remind our viewers that, as you say, Alan, it is an unfolding story. We can see pictures too from Washington. These are pictures of the Pentagon in the center of Washington. It appears that it too has been the victim of a terrorist attack this morning US time, of course. A passenger jet has flown into it, and as a result the explosion and the smoke is what you're witnessing now. Alan, can you give us an idea of the scene on the streets of New York this morning as you watch?
It's strangely quiet where I am now. I think people are in shock, and a lot of people are glued to their television sets, both in offices and in their homes. Even now I can still hear other emergency services racing downtown. But the World Trade Center is part of our everyday geography in New York. It's hard to think of another London equivalent, perhaps St. Paul's Cathedral or Big Ben. But we see it every day. It is part of our lives. I see it every day and every night from the roof of my building. And to see this shrouded in pools of smoke, knowing that beneath those pools of smoke there are almost certainly heavy casualties, is really almost impossible to believe. It's like a scene from a science fiction movie. And New Yorkers, who are pretty well prepared for anything, this is a city that's always rich in incident.
Alan, we're now looking, if I can just interrupt you for a moment, if you'll excuse me, we're looking at pictures now live from the Pentagon. We can see the devastation that has been caused there. Fire tenders attempting to calm the scene down by spraying water there, but the whole building, or certainly one significant part of the building, appears to be completely charred and burnt out by the impact of this plane which flew into the building just a little while ago. This was the 3rd attack in an hour at the heart of US government. There will be a statement shortly, and we shall wait on that. President George W. Bush has already spoken. He appeared to be visibly shaken by the impact of this terrorist attack on his nation. He said that the full resources would go to help the victims. He called it an apparent terrorist attack. It would seem that there can be little doubt now that that is indeed what the United States of America has suffered this morning. Let's go to Helen Wright, live in the ITV newsroom with the latest. Helen.
Kirsty, it's a confused and unfolding picture that we're getting from the United States at the moment. I've just heard reports that a light aircraft was seen somewhere near the White House before the explosion at the Pentagon. And the latest I'm hearing about what's happened at the Pentagon is that a plane or a helicopter crashed on a helicopter landing pad near the Pentagon. And that appears to have something to do with the explosion that's happened at the Pentagon, the heart of America's defense systems. Just to recap on what else that we do know, we appear to be getting reports of 3 aircraft being hijacked. One may have been involved in the Pentagon situation. 2 commercial airliners, a 767 and a 737, apparently involved in what happened in New York, each crashing into separate towers of the World Trade Center. What I can tell you about what's going on the ground, the west wing of the White House has been evacuated. Areas of the Pentagon unaffected by the crash there have been evacuated. In New York, the financial district, other buildings there have been evacuated. The New York Stock Exchange has closed indefinitely in response to this situation.
Helen, we're looking at pictures now from New York. It would appear from the smoke that we can see that there has either been an additional, in fact there has been an additional explosion near the World Trade Center.
Yeah, as you say from those pictures,
we can see an incredible amount of smoke and fire has been caused by this additional explosion. So to add to the chaos and the casualties, insult to injury, another explosion near the World Trade Center in the center of New York. We're seeing those pictures live now from New York. All bridges, all tunnels into Manhattan, which of course is an island, have been closed. The whole of New York at a standstill, and the emergency services dealing with the scale of injuries and also the scale of this fire. It appears now, looking at those pictures, as if the whole of Manhattan itself is on fire. Kevin Dunn, these pictures that we're looking at now, just when we thought it couldn't get any worse, astonishing and disturbing pictures.
It is extraordinary, Kirsty, and one can only guess at the tragedy that must be unfolding on the ground, because of obviously the priority is for all the emergency services to do what they can to help the victims within the Twin Towers of the Trade Center, and the consequences of what appears to be this additional attack, which has almost engulfed the island of Manhattan in smoke and flame. So emergency services, which were obviously already at full stretch dealing with the initial attack and second attack, must now face the consequences of this devastating explosion in Manhattan, and also, of course, at the Pentagon itself.
Kevin, this explosion happened precisely an hour after the first hit by the airplane. We think, in fact, it may either be an explosion, or it could be that one of the World Trade Center towers has collapsed under the impact. It would appear, from the amount of dust clouds, that we can differentiate there between the smoke and the dust. The lighter cloud looks more like dust, so it could, in fact, be the impact of the plane destabilizing the building and the whole building collapsing.
Yeah, yes, that's quite possible. It's quite possible, because we're not seeing any flames or explosions, and after such a devastating strike against the tower, it's quite possible that there could have been further explosions within the tower, or that the tower could have almost imploded and collapsed, which would explain dust and smoke rather than flame.
We heard also there from the latest from Helen Wright in the newsroom that there is the possibility that a helicopter landed this explosion in fact, let's just take a look at these pictures right now. Oh, just as I say that, there we've got them back. Pictures of Manhattan, incredible pictures, pictures that certainly we've never seen the likes of before, and hopefully never again. We're looking at the plumes of smoke travelling from the top of one of the World Trade Centers. If you're just joining us, let me tell you that the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in Manhattan were at the center of an aerial attack from 2 hijacked passenger jets. It happened at 8:45 a.m. Eastern Time in New York this morning. We understand that one of the World Trade Towers may now have collapsed as a result, and the billowing plumes of dust that you see covering the center of Manhattan are a result of that collapse. There has also been an attack on the Pentagon, as we understand it, in Washington, D.C. From what Helen Wright was saying about this attack in Washington, D.C., it was a helicopter that landed. Now, either, of course, the helicopter could have exploded, or it could have contained people who were carrying explosions to damage the Pentagon.
Yes, obviously, it's too early, really, to guess at the source of the attack on the Pentagon. But
working there, that it's very, very difficult to move that amount of people out of that area very, very quickly at one of the busiest times of the day, just as they were going to work in the morning during the rush hour. And then, of course, with this incident that has just happened with the collapse of one of the towers, you have to remember that many of the emergency services, the firemen, the police, would have been on the ground underneath as that would have happened.
What more do you know about the third explosion that we've witnessed just a few moments ago in Manhattan?
Very, very little. I mean, the information is just coming through as we speak. I think the whole incident has stunned not just the emergency services, but also members of the public and members of the media. It's very difficult to keep up with the sheer pace of these successive explosions and events. It's something that nobody really would have imagined happening, and I think it's going to take some time to establish what the causes were, who is responsible, and what sequence these things happened in.
We're going to replay pictures now of one of the World Trade Center towers collapsing. That's what you're seeing now, one of the World Trade Center towers collapsing. Approximately 1 hour ago, 2 planes crashed. One plane crashed into the North Tower. A few moments later, a second passenger plane, a twin-engine passenger plane, crashed into the South Tower. As you've been telling us, the police made frantic efforts to try and evacuate the surrounding area. We don't know as yet how successful they were. Of course, as Greg was telling us, as you would expect, there were likely to be many people from the rescue services in the immediate vicinity trying to rescue people from the towers when it collapsed just a few moments ago. So just to update you, both towers now, we've seen with both towers have been hit by planes. We believe a third explosion in Manhattan, though that's yet to be confirmed, one of the World Trade Center towers has now collapsed following the plane crashing into it. And we should remember, of course, that we've also got this situation going on in Washington, D.C. with the Pentagon hit as well by a third plane, also we believe hijacked in the Boston area, in addition to the White House and the Treasury Department being evacuated. We're seeing pictures on the ground now in Washington, D.C. These are pictures of the Pentagon, which of course is the headquarters for the American military, an area of extraordinary security. The idea that planes could have been able to cross over Washington, D.C. airspace and crash anywhere near the Pentagon will come as a horrendous shock to people throughout the United States. Greg, our correspondent Greg Barrow in Manhattan, what is the atmosphere like in Manhattan now? What can you see?
I think the atmosphere is one of absolute surprise. People are just stunned. Nobody could imagine this in one of the most densely populated cities in the world. Two symbolic buildings, two enormous buildings that had come to symbolize American business power and strength around the world, just destroyed in a matter of moments one morning as people were going to work. The scene is just astonishing. You can see smoke now billowing across the island. We've seen aerial photographs which show the whole of southern Manhattan shrouded in this grey smoke. It looks like an attack at the very heart of America, and I think that's how it's being perceived by President Bush.
Well, President Bush, as you say, has spoken a few moments ago. President Bush suggested that they were terrorist attacks, which of course becomes increasingly likely. There's also been lots of claim and counterclaim as to who may have been responsible. One news story that I can give you, the Prime Minister, Tony Blair, who was due to be speaking at the TUC conference this afternoon, has cancelled his speech to the TUC conference, and we believe that the Prime Minister, Tony Blair, will be speaking shortly about this. Meanwhile, let's cross over to... no, we understand that the Prime Minister, Tony Blair, may be about to speak any moment now. George Bush, President George Bush, of course, has already spoken. He was due to be giving an address to a school, cancelled it, spoke about terrorism, and now the Prime Minister, it appears, is going to speak as well. But
indeed, John, President Bush was saying it was a national tragedy. This is before, I think, he'd heard about the explosion on the Pentagon and the evacuation of the Pentagon and indeed the UN and indeed of the White House itself. He said it was an apparent terrorist attack, and he said the federal government would give all resources towards helping those affected. Obviously, an extraordinary crisis for his very early presidency. And I think we're going to be able to go over to the TUC conference where we're hoping to hear from the Prime Minister, Tony Blair. He was going to make a keynote speech on public services and the unions. There he is, looking very solemn. There's Bill Morris, I think, about to introduce him, and we think that instead of making the speech as planned, he is in fact going to make a statement about what has been going on in America this day, really, that has shaken the world. We expect to hear from Tony Blair any minute now. As you can see there on your screen, Tony Blair, and on the right, devastation in New York. Let's hear what Mr. Blair has to say to the TUC and indeed to everyone watching.
Bill, Congress, as Bill has just informed you, there have been the most terrible, shocking events taking place in the United States of America within the last hour or so, including 2 hijacked planes being flown deliberately into the World Trade Center. I'm afraid we can only imagine the terror and the carnage there, and the many, many innocent people that will have lost their lives. I know that you would want to join with me in sending the deepest condolences to President Bush and to the American people on behalf of the British people at these terrible events. This mass terrorism is the new evil in our world today. It is perpetrated by fanatics who are utterly indifferent to the sanctity of human life. And we, the democracies of this world, are going to have to come together to fight it together and eradicate this evil completely from our world. Delegates, I hope you will understand that I don't believe it would be appropriate to carry on the speech that I was going to give to you today. I know I have issued copies of the speech. We will make sure that all delegates get copies of the speech. But I think it inappropriate to give that speech now, here. I will obviously want to carry on the discussions that we've had about the issues that concern us. I will now return to London. And once again, I thank you for your indulgence here. I'm very, very sorry it has turned out the way that it has. But I know that, as I say, you would want to join with me in offering our deepest sympathy to the American people and our absolute shock and outrage at what has happened.
Visibly shaking Mr. Blair, talking about what's been going on in the United States this extraordinary day when there have been 2 explosions, planes deliberately flown into the World Trade Center, and another one, we believe, flown into the Pentagon in Washington. We don't know how many people are dead, we don't know how many people are injured, but we understand that devastation has been wrought in New York itself. And Mr. Blair was saying there, many innocent people have lost their lives and many have been injured. Obviously, it's far too early to know what's happening. But he said this was definitely the work of terrorism, and he said Mr. Blair, along with other world leaders, would work to eradicate this evil completely.
Well, of course, as you would expect, claims and counterclaims changing all the time. Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine initially claimed responsibility for this, or a spokesman for the group claimed responsibility for this. We exercised some caution when we heard that, and perhaps wisely, because the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine has now come out quite unequivocally and said that it does not believe in killing innocent civilians and has no responsibility for this whatsoever. This, of course, is not the first time that the World Trade Center has been hit as a sort of symbol of American economic power. In 1993, it was hit as well. I'm joined now by our economics presenter. Of course, 5 hours before us, John, inevitably, of course, the World Trade Centers are going to be full of people. You know this area well. How many people are we looking at? These are packed towers, presumably, full of people working at that time of day.
Well, those 2 towers, between the 2 of them, employ roughly 50,000 people.
Some idea of the aviation landscape around there. There are some idea of the aviation landscape around there. There are some idea of the aviation landscape around there. There are some idea of the aviation landscape around there. There are some idea of the aviation landscape around there. There are some idea of the aviation landscape around there. There are some idea of the aviation landscape around there. There are some idea of the aviation landscape around there. There are some idea of the aviation landscape around